I think the field right now is oversaturated with resources for beginners and maybe not enough or very few resources for intermediates and advanced, unless you want to like pay $5,000 for a sans certification course, which is out of the budget of a lot of people.
There's a certification for bug bounties.
Hmm?
Like there's a SAN certification for bug
I
bounties.
don't think they have a certification for bug bounties, but they have a lot of certifications for penetration testers, plus a lot of
Ah, okay.
nowadays they have a lot of cloud security certifications, and I believe they are really good, but pretty expensive.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Let's
yeah.
let's start with the book. Let's actually talk about a book. It's just been out a couple of days ago, so it's like uh, out on No Starch, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. So the book has been out on No Start since November the 1st, and it's going to be out for the rest of the people in early December. I think this time it's for sure, right? I think for over the past few months, we keep saying, oh, it's going to be out soon. It's going to be out soon. But this time, I'm pretty sure. So rest assured, people, you will get your coffees. And the ebook is already out. So,
Yeah, awesome. What I liked in your book, because I took extensive notes on your book, I'm actually reading the technical books on my tablet, and I have a stylus. So on the tablet is I have a stylus pen, which allows me, let's see if we can have it focused.
yeah.
It allows me to take notes. The Samsung Notes app is really, really good, and it's free. And it's like a very enjoyable experience when you read a book and you're actually able to interact with it. It kind of like almost mimics the physical experience. So I had a lot of notes from your book, and most especially from the part for the expert techniques. I would have enjoyed and I would have loved if you would have gone deeper. But I mean, the book was already pretty lengthy, and it would maybe take maybe 500 pages to
Mhm.
expand on your expertise when it comes to code review. So tell me more
Yeah.
about it.
So I think in when I was writing the book, right, there is a lot of like trade-offs that I've had to make just because it's going to be a physical book that people have to hold in their hands and actually read, right? So you definitely don't want it to be like 1,000 pages long. So I've considered, you know, sort of what's when I'm deciding like what material to include in the book, like I want to touch on most of the basics and also extend into the intermediate levels for most of the basics, but I'm still like writing with more of a beginner and intermediate bug bounty hunter in mind, right? So I don't want to go too deep into a topic that maybe not everyone will find helpful or interesting, because I think most bug bounty hunters, they're still sort of working within the arena of a black box test, right? So that's why sort of I didn't write as much about code review as I could have. But you can always find that information on my blog, because code review is sort of like my main focus in both my work and my private hunting right now.
Yeah, come to think of it, I am actually I have your I have your Medium open in a private browser session, so that I can read all of the blogs that you've written there. And I've started with the very first ones, the very graphical ones that we're talking about SSRF. I think they date 2018 or 2019 or something, or even 2017. I'm not really sure, but it takes a lot of time to keep scrolling to get to the bottom of it. So I it's for anyone who's interested, go check out the Medium blog post, because they are extremely insightful, and maybe could be a book dedicated entirely to code review, because there's no good book out there for this topic yet. So
Mhm.
just saying.
Yes, that's a very good point. Maybe the next book will be about code review. Yeah, so with the blog thing, I started off writing more generically about bug bounties and about hunting for different vulnerabilities, right? But for the past year or so, my blog post has been focusing on more on the code aspects of these vulnerabilities, like how do you find deserialization vulnerabilities in source code directly, or how do you find XML external entity in source code directly. So that has been sort of like the major area of focus that I'm working on at the moment. But I have been blogging about different vulnerabilities since 2019. I think May was my first month of blogging, and I gained like 2 followers that month. And I was really, really happy and really, really excited. It was really fun. And I've just been like publishing maybe blog posts every week since then.
Awesome. um you want to talk about the books? The book actually, sort of like, when it comes to part three, so I have the table of contents in front of me. We're discussing about web vulnerabilities. Which of these chapters? So we have cross-site scripting, open redirects, clickjacking, CSRF, IDORs, SQL injection, race conditions, and finally information disclosure. Which of these ones would you? Which one of them is actually sort of like more of your favorite?
My favorite. Um, I'd have to say probably this chapter is like not the most technical chapter in this regard. I think the most technical chapter is probably the template injection chapter, where I talk a lot about sandbox escapes as well. But my favorite chapter would be information disclosure,
Hmm.
because that was like my favorite type of bug to find in bug bounty programs, right? When I was hunting for bugs a lot, I'm not hunting as much anymore, but when I was hunting a lot, I was constantly finding information disclosures. Like maybe out of 10 bugs I would find 9 of them would be information disclosures. And I just really developed like an intuition for how to look for like this disclosures, right? How to find like the private data of users on the site. How do you find leaked credential? How do you find like GitHub access tokens? So in that chapter, I sort of discuss about how I would go about on a website to look for these issues.
Yes. Well, let's talk about information disclosures then. Um, how should one start with information disclosure? Because if we can actually talk about this topic on multiple levels. One would be via passive reconnaissance, a lot of automation. So you could actually use a lot of automation to uncover information disclosure, or you could do it manually. So there's a lot to talk about. And when it comes to automation, what exactly would mean automation for information disclosure for you?
I think I don't do that much automation around information disclosure. My bug hunting approach is pretty manual.
Okay.
So most of the time I use automation up until the reconnaissance point, where I use automation to find like subdomains, to find web pages to target, and to sort of figure out the tech stack that the application is using. And then I dive in manually. Most of the time it's just a browser, burp suite, and that's it, right? That's sort of like my toolbox. And I use like the terminal sometimes to, maybe have to decode something, add to unzip something, that I use the terminal. But other than that, my process is pretty manual. And in that regard, manual hunting is very, very good for information disclosure, right? Because I'm pretty sure like the organization that hosts the bug bounties will have already run a lot of automated tests on their source code. But whatever is left there is it's my belief that it's better found manually. And I've had a lot of success, with just manually looking through the client side code of the application, as well as is experimenting with different request parameters to really tease out the information from the site.
Can you give me an example? The first one that comes to your mind?
Right. I think something that's very underestimated, I would say, in the hacker world is view page source, right? I found countless vulnerabilities by just right clicking on a website, viewing the page source, and then following the links to the different JavaScript scripts that the site is using, and then just searching for keywords like passwords or doing regex searches on the code base. And that way I found, Amazon web service credentials. I found like user passwords. Like once I was like browsing a profile page of a user on the site, and I right click and I control F password, and the password was there, right? This kind of
Really?
things. Yes. Happens surprisingly often, actually.
Was that like a sort of an application, a web application, and the user password was on the user profile page, sort of like in the source code?
So the passwords, the birthday, and like
Wow.
a whole host of other private information was just embedded on the source code.
Wow.
I know, right? Which I don't think it's that uncommon because, well, first, I found quite a few instances of that happening. And have you seen like the news of like the social security numbers that recently happened?
No, I haven't.
So in the United States, I'm not sure like which state it was. There was, I think, like a government website where if you go to their webpage, their employees' social security number is in the source code. And then the I think the ethical hacker who reported that vulnerability is getting sued by the government because the government
Really?
is saying like, you're hacking us. What the F? But the hackers and the InfoSec community, they're just like, he just controlled F. Like it's
It
not
did
his fault to
nothing,
view
right?
source.
Yeah, it's all there in
Mm-hmm.
public vista, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so the social security number is actually something private, right?
Yes. So in the US, a social security number is like the number that represents your identity, right? If you have
Right.
it, you can sort of go to banks and get accounts out of that person's name. So that's sort of how sensitive that information is. And then it's all just like in plain text in the source code of a government website.
And this actually still happens in 2021, right? So
Yes,
it's
exactly.
fascinating. I mean, it it often is that you don't have to. So I'm actually going to add on what you were saying when it comes to manual analysis. It often is that you don't need fancy tools, fancy automation, fancy scripts. You only need a browser. And one thing that comes to my mind right now when it comes to my tablet, because I don't want to carry my laptop with me all times. Sometimes I just want to leave it and forget about it for a couple of days. But when I have my tablet and I feel the urge to do something, there's this browser called Kiwi, I guess, which allows you to view the source code. And also, when you're visiting a client-side JavaScript file, it also prettifies it for you. So it actually beautifies the code so you can actually read it. So whenever I have only my tablet, I actually look into one of the programs that I have, and I just visit their web application and just start from there. Go view the source and then view individual JS files. And it's like it's the most minimal setup. You don't need to buy anything. You don't need to buy any product, expensive premium product. You just need the browser, and that's it. So it's fascinating how fast or how easy it is to be part of the security, to be part of the research community when it comes to cybersecurity today. And yeah, I guess that's what I wanted to add.
Yes, that's for sure. I think the like these like fancy tools, like fancy scanners and all that, they could be very helpful, right? But they're not absolutely necessary when it comes to, starting to hunt for bugs and so on. So I think that's where what it comes down to. It's helpful to have tools, but it's okay if you don't have access to them too. You can find plenty of bugs by just you can find plenty of bugs by just with your manual, just with the browser, and maybe a proxy like burp suite community is what I've been using since the start of my bug bounty hunting journey. And it's also the only tool that's really required to follow all the steps in my book as well. So I don't want to exclude anyone from any tool or trying out
Right.
an experiment in the book. So the book is exclusively written in with free tools in mind.
Which is really important because not everyone can pay for a $400 license for a year of using an expensive product. So really good approach. I think that you started writing the book with the beginner researcher in mind, right?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, that's definitely what I had in mind was because when I started learning about penetration testing and bug bounty hunting, right, I often find myself spending hours just to find the right resource on the internet that that I can use that fits what I'm looking for and B is technically correct, right? A lot of online resources, they're written maybe with outdated information and or they're written with not that much research behind it. So a lot of the times it takes a lot of work just to go into all the resources and sort of see what is actually valid and what fits your use cases. Right. So the idea of my book is that I want to write a book that I wanted to read when I started, right? I want to write a
Right.
book that discusses a topic comprehensively. I wanted a resource that discusses all the aspects of like a specific vulnerability or specific technique with clear language. And I also want to write something that is sort of like the technical validity. There's no problem, right? Every line of code, every command, every tool in that book has been validated and you can just use it right away. So you don't have to spend time like actually testing it out yourself before you can see even if you can use the tip mentioned in the book or not.
Awesome. So it's like I think it's a privilege nowadays to start in bug bounty hunting and cybersecurity research because you have all these amazing resources. You have your book, which has just come out. You have Peter Jaworski's book, which is on a similar topic. Plus, you have all the blogs, all the information in the world. Whether you enjoy learning from a free course or from a YouTube video or from a book, all the resources in the world are there for you. You just need to put in the time and actually do the work.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only prerequisite that one needs to actually get started. No money, no upfront investment, no nothing, just your time, dedication, and go for it. uh in one of your recent talks, I think it was on the dev slops or sort of like it was, I think it was an OWASP channel on YouTube. You were discussing about an interesting technique, and I would like to actually talk about it here, repeat it maybe for higher visibility. which is really interesting. And it often yields results because it takes you a step further into the process, and it has a lot to do with manual stuff. So when you're actually loading a JavaScript file, if you have you're loading a client-side JavaScript file, you have an extension on your browser that beautifies it. You actually see most often than not, you see a pretty compact version. You don't see the specific code, the code that was actually written by the developer. And you're talking about in this talk, you were telling people how to access the map file, and then sort of like download the map, reverse engineer, and actually read the code that was on the server side, on the developer side. So want to talk a little bit more about that, because I think it's really interesting.
Mhm. So that's actually, I think you're referring to the .git directory reversal, right?
No,
Oh,
not
not
the
that one?
git.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting. So let's say, for example, that I have a main.js on a web application, right? We
Uh-huh.
have the webapp.com/main.js. When we access the main.js file, we also have the ability, because the developer didn't remove the map file, we have the ability to access main.js.map. And in that case, we can see the map. We download the map file. And if you have a tool that reverses the map into the original code, you can actually read the original code and better understand what happens in the code than if you would just read the main.js file. Do you know what I'm talking about now?
Oh, actually, that's an interesting technique, but I don't think that was me, actually.
I think you talked about it. So
Really?
yeah,
Okay,
I
I don't
mean,
really remember it.
uh, I'll send you the
Main.js.
link after we finish the recording if I find it. But
Okay.
yeah, I think you were talking about this. And it's really interesting because you get to read what the developer actually wrote instead of the minified code, and you can actually better understand what happens there. And also, it often is that comments in that original code don't make it into the production. So sometimes developers actually leave very interesting, juicy, sensitive information in the comments that is not in the main.js. But if you reverse the code with using the map, you can actually read the comments as well. So it's really interesting.
Mhm. Yeah, I think the thing with source code is that once you have access to the source code, you basically have the keys to the kingdom, right? You can use it to like
Yeah.
find secrets, you can use it to, you know, analyze it for other vulnerabilities. Like most vulnerabilities that we test for in bug bounties, like deserialization issues, cross-site scripting, they're so easy, so much easier to find in source code, right? Rather than from a black box perspective. So
Yeah.
that's why I've really been getting into a lot of source code analysis, just because I think it's like a very interesting and efficient way to hunt. And it's probably what we need to teach like most software developers and most security professionals how to do, just because it's so efficient. And I do think that so a lot of bug bounty people, right? You want to eventually get into more advanced penetration testing career, or maybe like an application security career. Then learning like source code review is very, very helpful for you, right? If because you will not just understand the hunting part of the vulnerability, you'll also understand how these vulnerability manifest in application themselves. And in turn, you can learn about how to secure these applications from there too. So it will be extremely helpful for a lot of people if you learn to review source code for vulnerabilities.
Yeah, sort of like you're more of a complete, you have more colors to your name, for example, is not only the red color, but you also have the blue color and all the mixes in between, because maybe if you combine some of these shades of colors, you can get to the purple. So you have all the colors to your name if you're able to not only do offensive stuff, but also do, maybe if you understand code, you're able to actually get into the defensive, and it's like you get a full picture of what happens.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
there's this debate in the community that can you be a penetration tester without actually writing a single line of code? Of course you can be, or a bug bounty hunter, but you're gonna be far more handicapped with only that specific skill under your name if you just use someone else's tools, if you just do automation, if you just use scripts instead of also being able to write your own stuff. And it's not like you have to be the next developer actually writing an application from scratch to actually do code review. You need far less. The requirements to actually do code review are far less significant or far less demanding than the requirements that you would have to fulfill to be a full stack developer.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. I would say like for the penetration tester and for bug bounty hunters, if you can just learn to read code, you would have upgraded your skill set much, much more. And another thing was with like learning how to code in like the offensive security industry, is that you're right. You absolutely do not have to build like an entire application from scratch, like all the different models, all the you don't have to build the GUI and all that. I mentioned earlier that I use automation for a lot of my reconnaissance workflow, right? And a lot of that is I'm just sort of piecing together the tools that I like, and then I'm building it into a master tool that I can run from my own preference, right? So maybe I like the subdomain enumeration functionality of this tool, and I like the screenshotting functionality of this tool. So I write some code to sort of like weave it together so I can run it all within just one command, or I can customize it to fit my own workflow and the targets that I'm working on. So that is also extremely helpful. And I think that's why I think a lot of people can learn how to code, because just to get to this basic competence of coding or scripting is really not that difficult. And it can open up a lot of new opportunities for you as a penetration tester to like start customizing the tools that you use instead of just consuming it.
Yeah. And to move a little bit further, just from reading the code, it's actually really easy to learn how to code basic stuff nowadays. For example, for starters, Bash could be intimidating for a lot of people, so you wouldn't start with Bash, but maybe you would start with something very simple like Python, because Python it's probably the simplest way to start when it comes to developing stuff, and the community is extremely big. You have a lot of you have an ocean of free resources to actually learn how to develop stuff in Python. You have a lot of libraries in Python. So for someone who's actually, and then of course I would say the next progression to actually build faster tools would be Golang. I personally try to learn Golang myself, but it's actually taking a lot of time because I'm not actually, it's not part of my daily priority. But what I want to highlight here is that for someone who wants to get into not only better understanding code, but also trying to develop stuff for themselves and also piece stuff together, as you're saying, because it's far easier to take two tools or two scripts and then actually make a combination of them for your own automation. Like for example, I have a couple of scripts. I have a bash script that takes output from one tool, feeds it into another tool, and then actually runs stuff with that tool, and I get the output, which is, so all I need to do is provide a little bit of input and then let the tools run, and then I come back and review the results manually. So it's like coding can be really helpful. That's what I wanted to say in a few words.
Yeah, for sure. I have coincidentally, I think I have like the exact same setup. I have a bash script that allows me to input like I think the command is just like recon and then something.com, right? And then when I run that command, it will automatically run like all these different tools on the website and then pretty parse the results and then output like into the final report for me to like dive deeper into. So I think that has been extremely helpful. It's a tool that I use every time on every target, really. And yeah, it's really not that difficult to build. Um, I don't know, it'll maybe take you like a week or two to learn bash scripting, and you can really upgrade your workflow so much, right? You'll save yourself so much time with just running the tools manually. And now you can just run it all in the background. You can run it when you sleep, even. And you can even
Definitely.
build things like, monitoring software where you're monitoring for new changes on a site, or you monitor for like new subdomains for that domain name, or you're monitoring for subdomain takeovers. Even all of those things can be automated, and then they can really lead to a lot of fast and easy bugs. I know that I don't automate as much, but I do know that the most successful bug bounty hunters, they automate a lot. They maybe automate like 80-90% of their workflow. And that's why they're so efficient in looking for bugs, right? Because they know exactly what their workflow is, and they translate that into code, into a script, so that they don't have to do every step manually. And then they may maybe just finally they manually construct the exploit, or they manually verify the results and then they report it, right? So that's a way smoother and way faster workflow than um like for someone like me who don't automate anything and just enjoys the fun of manually hunting.
Yeah. Um, it also is that you would leave stuff that cannot be automated. So you would actually automate everything that you can automate and then focus manually on the stuff that you cannot automate. Like, for example, looking for logic flaws, looking for some sort of information disclosure, reading code. We have all of these tools that search, and all of these scripts that actually search for keywords in code, like for example in JavaScript. But it's not the same thing as actually going through the JavaScript file itself and actually reading the code and understanding what happens there, decoding a function and seeing what that function does. It often is that when I read JavaScript code, and I would say that I'm not very good at it, but sometimes I am able to reconstruct a link from the JavaScript code and actually be able to get to juicier information that a parser like link finder and other JavaScript tools wouldn't be able to output to me if I would run that tool over the JavaScript file. So it it really is important to actually know what you can automate and what deserves your full focus and attention. So yeah, I guess I guess we need to actually leave. We have a lot of stuff to talk about, but I don't want to keep this too long. So we should leave. We should leave interesting topics for future discussions, such as dive deeper into resources. We could dive deeper into resources for non-beginner resources, which we haven't been able to discuss too much today. We can also talk about different types of cybersecurity research, bug bounty hunting that people can do when it comes to, you have different types of assets like web, mobile, network, source code, firmware, IoT stuff. We have different platforms that we can talk about. So we can wrap it up here and then focus and discuss in detail other topics in future sessions. So let's actually tell people where they should find you.
Okay. I think the best way to find me is probably on Twitter. So that's the one channel where I post about every single thing that I put out, right? I post about my blog posts, I post about my YouTube channel, and I post about the conference talks that I will be speaking at. So it's Twitter, and the handle is Vickie Li 7. So it's VICKIELI 7. And that's the best way to like find me and follow me. And I totally agree with you. This is probably like a good stopping point for our conversation because for these things like bug bounty hunting, for vulnerability hunting, I can literally go on for days, right? There's so many things, so many interesting to talk about, and so many different perspectives to consider. So let's wrap up for today and then we can talk next time.
Perfect.